All right. I'm going to start with a series of stories. Just after my first birthday, I fell in my high chair. I had not been rocking on it at all. I bit my tongue and split it in half, long enough that they had to find a way to stick it back together. And for a while, I couldn't make sounds properly or eat. At the same time, I managed to split my chin open so my mother could see, the bone. And I have a significant scar that runs from, here to, over here, which is good because I'm taller than most people, and little people don't really care about things like scars. When we lived in an apartment building in Sydney, I went missing a few times, but the last time that it happened, I was upstairs on a whole other floor, visiting my friend who I called the old lady, who probably wasn't old, but was just a lady. And after this, my mother put me on a leash. Why would you put this child on a leash? Look at me. I'm adorable. So well behaved. So listened to instructions. Never ran away. I was 4 here. The next photo of me, about 2 days later, I had a significant black eye. Just after I turned 7, my mum and dad took me down south with my sister, and I saw a lady archaeologist, which is important, chip away ash or lava at a home of a person somewhere near the pink and white terraces. And what she was trying to do was find out if there was a lace tablecloth on what she thought was a table. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is the best job in the world. I get to play in mud and find stuff. Awesome. This was the year that my parents started encouraging me to make books over summer. Because I was that child. The child that asked questions, the child that would go and have conversations with random strangers. The child was a little bit Gumby. Apparently, before I was 5, there was a time where the government was looking at my mother because I had so many trips to the A&E. The doctor just kind of looked at me and figured out my character and went, she's fine. It's just her. This hasn't changed, however. You see these little loopy things? I get them caught on the church doorknobs all the time. So I still am that kid. But at about 7, my parents encouraged me to make books. Every summer holiday or 2-week holiday, we had term 2 holidays, which were 3 weeks because I'm that anciently old. Halfway through winter, we had 3 weeks. And at this point, I was living in Manurewa, not Sydney anymore. And the far boundary of my bike riding, the furthest I could go was Totara Park. And on the way up the hill to Totara Park was Nathan Homestead. This place. And at this point, I must have asked my parents way too many questions about Nathan Homestead that they either didn't know the answer to, didn't care about, or were like, please, child, just go away. So came books. I was given one A5, which is the one where it's got a blank page and then the ruled lines. Slightly bigger, not the little thin ones, because 7. And I was told that I had to go and find out as much about the Nathans of Nathan Homestead, as much as about the house and what was happening in Manurewa. And at the end of the holidays, I had to present this book to my parents and, get this, the local librarian. Because the library was within my boundary, and that's where most of the time my parents sent me. And they would both mark it. They would mark my books. This is terrible. Anyway, I would trot off to the library within the boundary, up to Nathan Homestead to find things, try and draw things which I couldn't, do shadings of the plaques. I was like, yeah, this is going to be an awesome book. The things I remember about Nathan Homestead, the Nathans were one of the first Jewish families to move to New Zealand. Mr. Nathan started a business called LD Nathan & Co., which some of us might remember. They mostly did clothes, but then moved into supermarkets. So Super Value, Woolworths, Big Fresh, Price Chopper, and the shop of my early teens, Decca. Decca. Yeah, you guys all remember the Decca ad. And it was his grandson that actually built this house. They moved out of the big smoke of Auckland to the far extreme edge of the city, Manurewa, and built this house. Now, this is the second house they built because 2 years after the first original Nathan Homestead was built, Nathan Homestead was burnt down. Just like to say, it wasn't me, I wasn't alive then, so don't believe. And there was a rumor that floated around in lots of places, that the Nathans were actually buried in the cemetery that is now right next to Rainbow's End. And I was like, yes, I get to go to Rainbow's End. No, I got to go on the bus to Manukau and go next to Rainbow's End. And I found out that this actually was a rumour because the Nathans, being Jewish, were actually buried in the Jewish cemetery in Simon Street. Now, that all to say, when you create a book, you remember stuff. I created this book about the Nathans when I was 7. I got a B- for it, actually, because the librarian said I could have written nicer. I'm like, savage. I'm doing studying in the holidays. So creating books over summer holidays is not new for me, and it's not new for you to this church. If you're a visitor here, last year we did my favourite verse and why. We got everybody who was here, some of our other Baptist friends and family from around New Zealand to say, my favourite verse is blank, whatever one it was, and then a reason. Some people were a bit sneaky and got 3 or 4 or 6, maybe. Did you get 6 into the book? You got a few. So, this year we are creating a book, and it's going to be my favourite psalm and why. And if you were in my world, we would be creating our little exercise. So just pretend we're getting our exercise book out. And the first thing you ever did was write down what you know about the Psalms. So my top 10 things I know about the Psalms. Count them off if you know them. The Psalms is the longest book in our Bible. It contains 150 chapters and the longest chapter in the world. If anybody knows that psalm, I'm going to give you a good present. While we think most of it was written by David, there are many other authors. We sit there and we go, oh, these are the Psalms of David. But actually our Bible very helpfully points out that they were not all his. Some were the royal worship leader, the heather of sorts, who got paid and probably had lots of very nice gold to write songs for the nation of Israel. Some were songs from Solomon, David's sons, and some were throwbacks right off to the days of Moses, and some were just, things they found around. Songs that had been sung for so many generations that they had found their way into the Baptist, probably yes, still actually the Baptist family. Songs you would probably find in our Baptist family, like Father Abraham. Who knew where that song came from? But everyone seems to know it, so we'll chuck it in the songbook. Of course, there are different types of psalms. These are the things we know. They include the very obvious ones. These are the songs of praise, the good ones. Everything's okay, Jesus is amazing. But there are also the laments. Everything is not okay. And where are you? There are also songs that talk about God's wisdom, and these psalms that seem to talk about David and Solomon, but are actually talking about God. The book of Psalms is the songbook of the nation of Israel. And it's interesting to note that while there are songs of praise, there are also songs of lament. And if we think about our songs, the songs that we hear on the radio, the songs we hear on Sunday, the songs that we sit and have in our memory, I wonder how many of them are songs of lament. God, this is not okay. And God, where are you? Are we brave enough as individuals or as a people even to sing songs of God, you promised us, so where are you? I don't think there are many of those on the Hillsong Top 20 list. Not only does Psalms have our longest chapter, which is 176 verses. Now, very helpfully, it's an acrostic poem, but in Hebrew, so not useful for much of anything of this room. It also has the shortest chapter, 2 verses. Who's writing in that 117 is their favourite psalm? 117, just 2 verses? Yep, that's your favourite? Great. Is it because it's only 2 verses? That's all you can remember, eh, Joan? All right. In our book of Psalms, lastly, I think we're up to 10, is divided into these 5 sections. And these 5 sections are a repeat, it seems, of the first 5 chapters. They point towards and back to the first 5 chapters of our Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. This would be the very next page after the contents page of my little book, Things That We Know. And so as we create our book of Psalms, and if you're a visitor, feel free. You can write yours down and send it in. We'll have a visitors section. I love that. We will need title pages. So if you are an artist, if you have some creative talent, if you really think my sermons are terribly boring and you want to do some drawing, we need some chapter headings. As the book of Psalms is, it's split into 5 chapters, so we will split our book into 5 chapters. But these songs, right, they have been around for so long. They were around as oral history, not written down probably until the time of exile, which is why there's the songs of David and Solomon and Moses all lumped together. They are the songs of the everyday people, the songs that they sung as they were out doing work, the songs that they sung as they maybe pressed the olives or made the butter. Man, that takes ages. They are the songs that children would hear their parents humming. These are the songs that the people knew together. And around certain festivals and times and feastings, they would have sung certain songs. Much like whenever we go to Auckland, it's Whitney Houston's greatest hits. And whoever's turn it is, one person sings Whitney and the other person does the 1990s saxophone. And then the next song, someone else does Whitney and the other one does 1990s saxophone. These are the songs that the family knows. The family sings together and everybody has their part. But as much as they were for then, these psalms are for now. These psalms encourage us to trust God, to seek after Him, to know His forgiveness. They encourage us to express gratitude to the God who created the heavens and the earth. And they make sense, whether you're from New Zealand or from another culture, or if you're even from another generation. The Psalms make sense. So we know some stuff, right? We know some things about the Psalms. But so far, this would get me no marks. Because this is all stuff that I could have copied out of the Encyclopedia Britannica. We didn't have the internet back when I was 7. You actually had to go to the library, yeah. And these psalms are set up in such a way that they give the people of Israel then and the people of us now to praise God, to celebrate God's majesty, His power, and His creation. These psalms aren't found in any particular place. So there are the first 5 sections that they are found, but the authors and the editors just kind of shoved them anywhere. And so we're going to have to create little symbols to go within our chapters, that while this is found in chapter 1, it's actually a psalm of lament. A psalm that expresses sorrow or grief or distress and appeals for God to help. There are psalms of lament, and it might be your favourite psalm. You might have lamented over something for years, and you've found that this is the psalm that holds you to faith because it says it's okay. It's okay to be grumpy with God. It's okay to be after Him to fulfill His plan. It's okay for you to be after Him to be your comfort. Because often those psalms finish at the very end with this point about what is the faithfulness of God, which brings us to these royal psalms. As I said, so often talking about David or Solomon, but actually talking about a king who is coming, who would rule forever. Much like the message in Isaiah, there would be a wonderful counselor, a mighty God, an everlasting Father, a Prince of Peace. These royal psalms talked about the goodness of God and His role as the king of everybody. Perhaps you are a little bit grumpy. And this is why these might be your favorite psalms. There are a whole heap of psalms that calls for God's justice and judgment against other people. If you want to write them down and look them up, there's Psalm 35, 69, 109, and 137. And they are strong-willed, passionate, almost angry psalms asking for God to intercede and punish wrongdoers. And what's interesting about these psalms is we don't actually know if the wrongdoer was actually doing wrongdoing all the time. Sometimes their wrongdoing is very obvious. They are crushing the poor. They are acting unjustly. But sometimes they're David just seemingly having a whine. God, kill my enemies. Like, oh, well, what had he done? But it doesn't matter. They're still in here. Because God is interested in all of our emotions. And then there is, and I love it because in all the Bible commentaries, when you're talking about Psalms, the junk drawer. The drawer that the psalmists, the commentators just shove stuff in because they don't know where it fits. Is it a hymn of praise? Is it a royal psalm? Is it something completely altogether? It's just a other. There's this mixed category, very unhelpfully. So we're going to need a symbol for that, like a M stylized or something. I am no graphic designer. So each of these psalms gives us space and permission to talk about how we are feeling in our life right now, what our attitude towards it is, and even our attitude towards God at the time. There are enough of them that cover the whole palooza of human emotions, from praise to lament to anger. But still, this is just information, right? I'm still not getting any marks from my parents. My handwriting has improved because it's now typed, and the computer fixes the spelling mistakes. Honestly, I'd get marks off for spelling mistakes. I was 7. They were mean. They weren't really. They just wanted me to be quiet and far, far away from them during summer. So we need a new page. On my contents page, on the very front page of my little A5, I would have something like this. What is our favorite? What is our favorite psalm? What is the world's favorite psalm? Psalm 119. All right, no surprises. Nobody gets any points because the favorite psalm of the world, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He lets me rest in pastures of green grass. It leads me to quiet pools of fresh water. He gives me new strength. He guides me in the right paths as he has promised. Even if I go through the deepest darkness, I will not be afraid, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me where my enemies can see me, and you welcome me in as an honored guest. And you fill my cup to the brim. I know that your goodness and love will be with me all of my life, and your house will be my home as long as I live. You may have done the corrections to the version that you know. Surely your goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, is how I remember it in my head. And if we were trying to do something with this psalm, what category would we put it in? What symbol would we put up the top of the page? Is it praise? Is it other? Is it a royal psalm as we talk about a king who is coming? Do these psalms point to Jesus in a way? Are they messianic? Or are we just reading into it because we know the rest of the story, the Christmas story, where we get to not anticipate peace and love and joy and hope, but celebrate and revel in it because Christ is here? Is this a poem and a song about a shepherd, Or is there a transition from a shepherd to a host? Because it starts talking about a banquet and a cup that overflows. Today I'm going to argue yes. Yes to all. It's the safest answer, and I'd get in trouble from my theologian friends at Carey College, but yes. It is about a shepherd, and it is about a great host. It is about a good king. And yes, it is about Jesus. Psalm 23 resonates as the world's most favorite psalm because it's comforting. It tells us that we are not alone in the world, nor are we left to do our own devices. And it offers, for those who believe in Christ, a bridge between the Old and the New Testaments. The Lord is my shepherd. Well, what does John 10:11 say? Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I am the good shepherd who will willingly lay down my life for my sheep. I wouldn't. Realistically, if it was a choice between a sheep and my life with a wolf or a lion, I would choose the Shelley. Really? One sheep. I know how much a sheep costs. We buy them occasionally. They're about $350 cleaned. A Shelley is worth more. But our shepherd, the good shepherd, Jesus says, the good shepherd lays his life down for his sheep. John 10 talks about Jesus as this great shepherd, the one who leads and provides. So yes, and the psalm is about all the things. It is a metaphor. It is a symbol. It is about Jesus. It's a little bit about us, the mostly helpless and often dumb sheep. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Jesus invited always the weary to find rest in him. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. When you think about the still waters, do you think about a lake or a water hole? Do you think about the sea that wasn't last 2 days, where it is just still? There's no wind. There's nothing to hide from. You're not trying to get away from the westerly. You're comfortable. You're safe. You're content. This is the peace that we are offered in Jesus, who restores our soul and leads us in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. You're getting me now, right? It's going to be Jesus, John, and the 23rd Psalm, this sermon. I am the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus says. No one comes to the Father but through me. Jesus himself is our great shepherd who leads the way on the paths. Yesterday, I went from the little place we were staying up through the back of the Whangaroa Harbour and over the hill to the Duke's Nose. And ahead of me, we sent Eleanor, who's just turned 8, and has the energy and the legs. And we gave her the job as a scout with the white hat, because we could see how far she was through the green bush. And her job, because she has so much energy, was to go ahead and scout the track and say, mud, 2 paths, high path, low path, tree. While there was a track, she felt important. She was leading us the way and keeping us out of harm. This is what a shepherd did. He went ahead, and every now and again when he needed a sione who would just break branches off and kick things off the path and move a rock that had fallen, because this too is the job of the shepherd, to make the path. While I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Really? Do we believe that one? In times of trial, times where we feel conquerable, where everything in us screams that it would just be easier to lie down and stop. Does God's victory over death in this life speak to us as true? In life, we are always walking through the shadow of death. It is not the death of the end. This death that we're talking about is the death that still tries to eat at us. Sin's corruption of us, the world's uncare of us. Here we have Jesus who is walking us through the valley, protecting us none the same. And here comes the switch that the commentators argue about. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Really? Could you imagine a little shepherd setting up a little table? Here's some clover, here's some anonymous weeds, here's some kikuya, some sunflowers. This is where the commentators argue that it moves from the shepherd image to a host image, where the host is generous to a fault, open-hearted, open-doored, open-tabled, where each table looks the same, not just a nice table up here for the good folk and the rest of you, here's some bread and some really cut wine, but where each table is set the same. And where his protection, the provision of the host, his power and his place in society enables you to sit down and eat and rest and be still, even though there might be an enemy. Because he knows that enemy knows if he crosses the line, the host provides not only food, but safety. And it foreshadows, I think, this meal of communion, where we're given the abundance of Christ himself. And the enemy is told, you cross this line, mate, and you're done. These ones who take my bread, my body, and take the cup of my forgiveness, they are mine. And you cross that boundary, mate. I've dealt with you before. I'm going to deal with you again. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Who gets anointed in the Old Testament? Kings, prophets. Not normal, everyday people, but each of us are offered the anointing, not just a tiny little bit, but enough that it runs over us, and it might make you go, yuck, because my hair is oily enough. But it is a sign of welcome and value. And then this last one, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You can see why people often have this at funerals. That we get to go and be with Jesus. The Jesus who talked about having many rooms and a place prepared just for us. Not like a random party where you just shove in and eventually your legs get sore, so you sit down on the side and hope that someone doesn't stand on you. But a room made for you. This is the gift of Christ, that we are offered a home now and a home forever with him. And while there are ongoing conversations and overwhelming scholarship built around Psalm 23, things that I have said other scholars won't say, and things that other scholars have said I won't say, it simply comes down to this. We know that in this psalm there was a shepherd, and that job isn't particularly confusing. Could you imagine? The Lord is my probation officer. I can't, even though I live with one. I really don't know what my husband does every day. But the image of a shepherd is something that was familiar to the people of the Bible. They had a clue about what a shepherd did, about what time they got up, about what hills they walked, about what clothes they wore, about what they had to do when they were out there. But there was also this other link. Because for those who wrote the 23rd Psalm, which is our mate, Israel's best king, David, he knew about what a shepherd did. But the nation of Israel did too. They knew about the shepherd in the very physical form, but they knew about the very shepherd in the spiritual form. that the kings and leaders of Israel were called to act as God's good shepherd, to practice his authority and safety. But also when these kings and rulers weren't doing well, the prophets called them out. The prophets called out those kings and rulers who failed to do good justice for the sheep of Israel. And they were so bad in the time of Ezekiel chapter 34, if you want to look it up later on, that God said, "You lot are awful. You are terrible as rulers and kings of Israel, so I'm going to step in. I'm going to send my shepherd, and he will care for the flock." And while the Psalms are not a prophetic book, they don't speak to what is coming, but speak to what people knew about God. They link into what people would have been knowing and expecting and understanding of God. Later on in that same book of Ezekiel 34, where God is saying, "You to the kings of Israel, you have been a terrible king. I will send my shepherd." Ezekiel 34:23 says, "I will set over them one shepherd, the son of my servant David, and he shall feed and watch over my people." So this is the world's favorite psalm. If you type it into Google, Psalm 23, bang, there it is. It's what comes up on most of the Google image searches. I've used it at about 5 funerals for people who have not known Jesus, but still wanted the psalm at their funeral. And I hope that Psalm 23 isn't everybody's favorite, or else we're going to have a very short book, just one chapter. But if this is our start and our introduction, it's pretty fantastic. You can see why for David who wrote it, for the people of Israel who used it, for us who still need it, why David called God the shepherd. While we celebrated Jesus' birthday on Wednesday, we celebrate that he didn't stay a baby, but can swing a mean shepherd's hook. Because let's face it, people, we're all a little bit sheepy. We're all a little bit hopeless. We need to be cared for. We need to be led into good places. We need to be defended. We need to be protected. We have to have someone to get rid of the flies that gather in the muck that sits on us. And we are often not very good at finding our own paths. So thank God for the 23rd Psalm. And we thank God that we have a Jesus, hey? Let me pray. Heavenly Father, as we look at the book of Psalms, as we think about what our own favourite psalm is it an encouragement? Is it a lament? Is it a song about you? Is it a song we sing together as your people? You have given us quite a songbook. And as we remember, as we look again and flip through and try to find the ones that we like the most, the one that speaks to us the most, may your Spirit be with us. Not that we will create a good book, because it will get all the marks, but because it is a sign of your faithfulness, of your presence with us, that you are, as promised, the Good Shepherd, the one from Ezekiel who will rule over us, provide for us, and make the way. Jesus, this week, may we be good sheep who hear your voice. May we look to the best shepherd. Amen.